Hey, Greentown Wesleyan. Great to be back with you today. I hope you're all doing well and thriving in this Holy Week. As we approach Easter, I want to take a look at a passage found in the book of Matthew. It's in Matthew 4, and we're just going to read verse 1. So let's turn there together. It says, "Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." And I don't know if you're anything like me, but it's so easy to misinterpret the meaning of this passage. It's so easy for me to think about, man, like this is some weird, warped and twisted view of God leading Jesus into a place of wilderness to be isolated and to have this time of trial and testing. But man, I don't believe that God is divided against himself. What if the wilderness was actually a place where Jesus could center himself on his identity as God's beloved Son? What if the wilderness was actually a place where Jesus could, just get away from all the distractions and spend time abiding in the presence of the Father? What if we have a misunderstanding of this passage and our misunderstanding of this passage actually colors our view of who God is? I think we can read this verse and think that God leads us into times of trial or times of hardship because, he wants to see if we can withstand the test. And I just don't believe that to be true about God's character. I believe that he wants to remind us and encourage us and shower us with his identity as God's sons and daughters. I believe that the wilderness and these times where we get to, one way or another, be alone. It's important to have community, but it's also important to remember that there's times when we need to withdraw and be alone in the presence of the Father and spend time getting away from the distractions so that we can receive his love and also the words that he wants to speak over our lives, which are full of grace and truth. What if Jesus going into the wilderness was actually because the Spirit was desiring to empower him to face the enemy, to withstand the trial that God knew he was going to encounter? And I think, man, this helps us understand so much more about times of trial or times of just wilderness where we feel alone. And all the time we are trying to draw near. We're trying to draw near and hear the words of God. But what if those times that feel like a physical depravity or feel like we are socially kind of distanced or isolated, what if those times are actually potential times where we can zero in and hone in on God's identity that's spoken over our lives? What if the wilderness was actually Jesus's place of power? Man, I think that just colors my whole perspective and view of God in a profoundly different way, in a much better way. And looking deeper into this story, it actually helped me understand Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane so much deeper and better. So I'm going to turn to Luke 22 and read a little passage from this book as we move forward. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, it says, "Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, 'Pray that you will not fall into temptation.' He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them. He knelt down and prayed. He said, 'Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done.' An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. Gethsemane is actually translated as oil press. And back in the first century, oil was made by, tossing large stone slabs onto olives so that the oil would be pressed out of them. And Jesus, facing the trial of all trials, understanding that he was going to the cross, he was resolutely facing the cross, about to take the weight of the world upon his shoulders, is feeling himself a lot like an olive in the olive press. And man, what did he do in this situation? He withdrew to pray. He withdrew to pray so that he could be empowered during this deep, deep trial. And man, I think this also has so much to speak to our current circumstances. What if what seems like a physical depravity, what if what seems like a time of trial, what if what seems like a social isolation is actually providing for you and your families a spiritual abundance? What if what seems to be socially difficult, what if what seems to be culturally difficult right now is actually giving you all an overwhelming amount, an overwhelming assurance of God's identity that's been placed on your life? What if what feels to be pressing on you, what if what feels to be crushing you is actually providing new oil, new wine, new life, new hope, and new grace being spoken over your lives? I pray that you would be courageous enough to withdraw, to spend time alone with God and hear what he has to say about who you are. Maybe you can ask God today, who do you say that I am? And receive his words of grace and truth with open hands and an open heart.